Hello and welcome to Adam's Gardening Guides. Today I'm going to explain how I'm going to plant up this small outdoor area in full sun with strawberries to provide homegrown pickings for as long as possible. Now I garden in the United Kingdom in Cambridgeshire, garden on a clay soil, but I'm going to improve this bed in a minute, and I'm going to plant it with a variety of strawberries to provide that long season of pickings. You see, strawberry plants can come into flower and fruit early in the season, June time, a little bit later, June into July, even July, or you can get ever-bearing or perpetual fruiting varieties which flower and fruit over a longer period of time. So today in this bed I'm going to plant a traditional favourite called Cambridge Favourite, and this is described as medium-sized, firm fleshed fruit, full of flavour, cropping from mid-June to mid-July. It's a vigorous plant and produces a good, reliable crop with good resistance to disease as well. So I've got my Cambridge Favourite. I've got a variety called Symphony, and this is a late season variety, so it will flower and fruit after my Cambridge Favourite. Symphony has bright red fruits, good flavour, and it should, I think, give me fruits July-ish time here in my garden. Already here in May it's got flowers and fruits developing on it. But to give me a longer season of fruit picking, I'm also going to put in this ever-bearing or perpetual fruiting variety called Albion, and this will start cropping probably around about June time and give you flushes of flowers and fruits right the way through summer into autumn. So with these three varieties planted in this bed, I'm going to have pickings for hopefully several months on end. Not a big glut of fruit all at the same time, which is the risk if I just chose one variety of strawberry and planted up the whole bed. I get lots of fruits, too many to eat at one time. And what I want is little and often, so I can come out in the morning, pick some lovely fresh strawberries to put on my cereal to eat for breakfast. But the first thing I've got to do is prepare the bed, and soil preparation is key because these strawberry plants will stay in the ground for quite a few years. I'm hoping that I'm going to get fruit and pickings from these plants for probably 3, maybe 4, even more years than that. I'll just have to see how the flowers and fruits are developing. If they start to wane, I'll have to clear the bed and start again, but I'm hoping they'll keep going. And on some of these plants I've already got some runners developing, and strawberry runners are a great way to propagate new strawberries because you get little tiny strawberry plants develop at the end of each runner, and you can peg these down into pots of compost until they're well rooted. Then you can separate them from the parent plant and you'll have some new strawberry plants to either plant up new pots and beds or to replace any plants in your bed which look like they're failing or the cropping is diminishing. So runners are a really good thing to have. Now my bed itself I need to prepare. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to dig in lots of compost or farm-up manure. You might have homegrown compost at home. You could buy bags of peat-free compost, or I've got this composted farmyard manure I'm going to dig in. And then once I've prepared the soil, I'm going to cover the bed with a weed suppressing mulch. I'll explain more about that later on. So firstly, let's get the soil prepared. Now I have already just lightly dug over this area to break up the soil, but it's important that you improve the ground. Once I cover it with the weed suppressing mulch and I've got the plants in, it's not going to be as possible to get some really good rich organic matter deep down for the roots of the strawberries to grow down into. So I'm going to dig in, and I'm going to be quite generous in this bed here, which is probably about 8 foot by 4 foot or so. I'm going to dig in a couple of bags of this composted farmyard manure. As I say, any good organic matter will be fine, but I do find that this is a nice rich material. I need to dig it down quite deeply, but the first thing I'm going to do is to spread it over the surface of the soil. Then I can fork it in. I'm not going to put it all in yet, just put about 1.5 bags on top. Keep a little bit more to rake into the soil surface in the middle, and then just spread it out over the whole bed. You quite often find some bits of old debris, a bit of old wood in this. So it looks like it's got some sort of a composted wood material in with the farm manure itself. If you've got any big bits, just literally whip them out, spread that over nicely, and now dig it in, because I want this organic material to be deep down in the ground. So all I tend to do is to take a spadeful and turn it over, push the spade down, organic material, and just bury it down. So this organic matter is now a few inches down. And once I've planted the strawberry runners, strawberry plants into this, that's some nice rich material for the roots of the strawberries to explore. And the thing about organic matter is, well, it locks in moisture, so it holds onto the moisture. So during the dry summer, it should keep the soil moisture for longer. And obviously strawberries need that moisture to make sure that they ripen and swell well. But also organic matter feeds the soil by feeding the soil organisms. The worms and the other organisms will feed on that organic matter, turn it into humus. They break it down, they release the nutrients in a natural way. So although I probably will give the plants some feed during the summer, the organic matter as it breaks down will release its own nutrients, and those in turn will feed the strawberry plants. And I'm a great advocate of feeding the soil to feed the plants. Artificial fertilizers have their place, particularly in pots and containers where you've used a pot of compost, and the nutrients in that compost will be used up very quickly by the plants. In the soil it's different, and I think by feeding the soil, which has got millions and millions of microbes and worms and other things in it, they will gradually break that material down. As I'm digging it over, I'm finding little worms in the ground already. So these worms will feed on the organic matter. They'll produce drainage channels through the soil so the bed stays nice and drained, and they'll break this farm manure down into a lovely compost. So here's another worm here. Lovely to see so many worms in the soil. And if you don't feed the soil and the soil runs out of organic matter, then you won't have a decent worm population either. So leave me to this. I'm just going to get the rest of this bed prepared. So that's the first lot of compost dug in. I'm just going to level this out a little bit. Whenever you dig and add extra material to the ground, it always raises the soil surface a bit. And obviously, although this raised bed edged with timber is a few inches higher than the surrounding soil, I don't want it overflowing, so just prepare that over again. Some really nice worms in here. Really grateful I've got a good worm population in. If it's getting a bit high, just tap it down a little bit too, trying to break up any lumps which are in there. And now I've got just a tiny bit more compost here. I'm going to put a bit more in, and I'm going to save just a little bit, because when I plant the strawberries I can just put a little bit of this compost into each planting hole, so that each plant has got its own little reserve of compost underneath it to root down into. So I'll keep that to one side. As I said before, any big lumps you get in the compost, just chuck them out. Spread this last bit of compost over the soil surface, and this will gradually be taken down. You might have noticed yourself, if you ever do this in an open border and you put compost on the soil surface, it disappears. if you use this this farm manure as a mulch, gradually, bit by bit, you go back over the months, you suddenly, where's it all gone? The worms have taken it down. They've pulled it down into the soil where it can do its bit. So just, again, raking over like this, breaks up the lumps, remove any stones or bits of root or anything you find in your bed, and mix the compost into the top few inches of soil. So we'll just leave this to me for a minute and I'll just get this bed finished. If you think the soil level is still a bit too high, then there's no harm at all in just gently walking over the area just to push it down. I don't want to completely get rid of all the air pockets in the ground because roots do want some oxygen, and those air pockets in the ground help the rain to drain away. But I would rather settle it now when I'm preparing the bed than plant into this and then over the course of the coming weeks the soil gradually settles and drops and it leaves the strawberries sitting a bit too proud at the soil surface. There we go, that's about right. Now, with the soil prepared, what I'm going to do on my strawberry bed, you don't have to do this, but I think it has an advantage, is I'm going to cover the bed with this black woven weed suppressing mulch. Now, some people when they grow strawberries in the soil, mulch the strawberries with straw. I've tried that in the past, planted the strawberries, and as they flowered I put straw around them. I found that that straw introduced lots of really nasty weeds into my garden soil. So instead I'm going to use this membrane. Now I find these woven membranes, they last for years and years and years. You can use them on paths in your garden as well, or you can use them in a gravel garden, cover the soil, cover it with gravel and plant your drought loving plants through it. But on the strawberry bed I'm going to cover it with this material and plant through it. Now, because it's a woven material, it excludes light so the weeds won't grow up, but it lets the rain and the irrigation water drain down. Being black, it absorbs the heat of the sun, so it helps to warm the soil up more quickly in the spring. That encourages good early growth. It also gives some protection from cold nights to the flowers which are developing through May and June, so it keeps the flowering performance good. And what it does when the plants have started forming fruit is that rather than rain falling on the soil and splashing soil up onto the fruit and the fruits getting really dirty, this keeps the fruits cleaner. If the fruits do lie down onto the surface, they don't get covered with soil. And I also find that those little slugs which you find in the soil don't eat the fruits, so the fruits tend to stay cleaner, develop earlier, and you don't get so much damage from slugs. Now, the material itself, I need to just bury down the edges, so the first thing I'm going to do is around this whole bed I'm going to make a little moat, and I need to be able to make this so that I can push the material down into it. So that's going to be my next job. I'll see you in a little while. There we go, a nice little trench or moat right the way round the whole of the bed, and the surface pretty level throughout, because I'm now going to be covering this with the weed suppressing mulch. That's the last time I'll be able to reach this. It's been dug, it's had compost mixed in, so it's really ready. What I'm going to do is to spread this over and just bury the edge down into the ground so that you don't get any weeds coming up. So put that right over, and then this edge here, just take it over a little bit further than it needs, and then just push it down into the ground. That's all you need to do. Just ease it down right the way round the edge of the bed. You can just push it down with a trowel if you like to bury it. That way nothing will get in underneath. There's no room for any weeds there, and then along this edge here, the back edge, again the same thing, just literally push that down into the soil around the edge, tuck it in nice and neatly, and that will be the job done. So when I complete this and I go all the way around, I'll cut another strip to go down that end as well. We've got the weed suppressing mulch over the bed. I'll cut some slits in this to plant into and then fold the material back so that there isn't too much room for weeds to grow. And this will keep the bed nice and covered, weed free, stop the fruits getting dirty, keep the pests down. It will do a great job. So I'll see you in a while. So now I've got the weed suppressing mulch in place, beautifully settled in all the way around the bed. I'll be able to start the planting. I say 3 varieties: Cambridge Favourite, Albion and Symphony. And I'm probably going to put about probably about 4 plants across the bed and maybe 8 along. I'm just going to have to play around with the numbers here and see how they'll best fit in, giving enough space between each plant and not planting too close to the edge of the bed, because I'm going to put a frame over the bed covered with netting to keep the birds off. Otherwise these fruits as they ripen will be so tempting for birds, they'll come in and eat the lot. So I want to put a frame over, and if I put the plants too close to the edge, then the fruits are going to be near the edge and the birds will be able to peck at them and eat them. So my next job is to space these out and just work out how many strawberries I can get in this bed. So just looking at the spacing now, I reckon I'm going to try and put 4 across the bed. These will be a little bit close to the edge when I do it, and probably 5 rows down. It will be quite compact and quite congested. If you've got more space, you could leave more space between the plants, but I think with the varieties I've got, I'm going to space these out 4 by 5, and this will give me a nice bed of pickings of those 3 varieties right the way through summer and hopefully into autumn too. So the first strawberry I'm going to plant is one of these Cambridge Favourites, and I'm going to make a little slit in the plastic mulch. If you do this nice and neatly, just literally make a cut one way and across the other, what you'll be able to do is to fold the material back to create the planting hole, and then once you've planted the strawberry, you can fold it back to stop any weeds growing up. So I'm going to make a little hole, but I'm also, I saved a little bit of the compost. Let's go and put a handful of compost in here first, just so there's a nice bit of fresh compost in here to improve the soil just where I'm putting this new plant. So make your hole, get your little strawberry plant. As I say, this is one of the nice little Cambridge Favourite plants, nicely well rooted. Now you want to plant it so that the level of the compost is about level with the soil surface, so just ease it around a little bit to get the surface right. Push it down. Any fruits that are developing, as you can see, aren't going to be lying on the soil, they're going to be lying on the surface of the mulch, and then I can just get some more compost in around it, ease that round, firm that down well. And once you're happy with that, the next thing is watering. So watering well from above to settle the compost around the strawberry plant. Give it a really good soaking. Once you've done that, you can fold back the mulch around the crown of the plant itself. There you have it. And just repeat this across the whole bed. Little slits in the mulch, cross cut, so you can fold the material back completely to get the plant in place. Dig out your little planting hole. A bit of fresh compost in there as well to help to improve the soil. Once you've made your hole, take the strawberry plant out of its pot, sink that down into the hole and just tease the compost around. And as I say, the level of the top of the root ball of the strawberry plant from its pot is about level with the soil surface. Just fold that back round, ease that in, and now water well to make sure the root ball is soaked and settle the compost soil around the compost itself. There we go. And then lastly, just tease back those folds of mulch nice and tightly around the plant itself. And when you are watering the bed later in the summer, you can water over the top of the mulch and the water will just go through and reach the plants below. And now just repeat planting across the bed. I've got some more to go in here. As I've just jiggled around a little bit, I've got 4 rows across, and I think you can get 6 rows down the bed, quite tightly planted, as I said before, but I think in a bed you can get away with it. If you have got more space, give the plants more space to grow, but I want to get good production out of this bed here. So I'm just going to go on planting these and get the rest of the plants in the ground. The sun is shining, I need to get them planted and watered and established. There we go, and now with the new bed planted, I'm going to give it one final water. I really want to make sure that soil is settled in tightly around the root balls of all of the plants, and there's a really good reservoir of water in this bed. While things are flowering and fruiting, you really must make sure they don't go short of water. It's the same as strawberries, tomatoes, beans, any crop you're growing in the garden really. If there's a shortage of water when the flowers are developing, then they can abort, they can drop off and they won't set. So make sure that you have a good watering if the weather is dry, and also as the fruits are ripening, because you want the fruits to develop to their full size. So check every week. If the weather's dry, give your bed a water. If it's been raining, then the water should percolate down through the weed suppressing mulch and keep the root balls nice and moist, but just check regularly. Now the other thing I've done is to make a frame that fits neatly over my strawberry bed. You can buy all sorts of kits to make frames, or you could just literally put a post in each corner and a jam jar or a pot on top and cover it with netting. But I find a frame is a more resilient way of doing it. This is an aluminium tube and it comes with these sort of corner pieces which you can snap into place to build a frame of any size. You can cut the posts up and do whatever you want. Use it to cover your vegetable beds to keep the pigeons off, or here over my strawberry bed to help keep the birds away, particularly the blackbirds, which would devastate the fruits. My next job is to cover this with netting. So join me in a minute and we'll cover the frame with some net. Well, I've just moved the frame up to my lawn where I've got a bit more space to actually cover it with netting. And I've used this netting before. I've got to stretch it out over the whole of the frame, right the way down to the bottom at the sides. And I think the important thing when you're using netting in the garden is that you try and make sure it's as safe as possible for garden birds. I use these little C-shaped clips to hold the netting in place on the frame, and what you want to try and do is to ensure that the netting is taut and tight around the sides, it's not loose, so that any birds that come along don't get trapped in the net itself. And it's a very good idea, if you do have netting covering crops and fruits in your garden, that you check it every day just to make sure that no birds have got caught up in the netting. But keeping it taut, clipping this netting down over the frame very tightly down around it and down the sides is what I'm going to do next. There you go, netting on. Now I can put the frame back over the strawberry bed. So there we have it. The netted frame is now in place, and this will keep the birds off my crops. All I have to do, you can check through the netting if I see any ripe fruits, and I probably check my strawberry plants every day when they're coming into crop. I can just literally lift the frame off. It's a light aluminium frame. I can whip it off and put it back in place afterwards. And I find it's easier than just peeling the netting back at the sides. The netting's nice and taut, and birds and wildlife shouldn't get caught in it, but always check your garden netting regularly in the garden. Now, if you notice that any of your strawberry plants are producing runners earlier in the season, and you don't want these, you don't want the plant to waste its energy producing the runners, then just literally pinch them out and cut them away, and then it stops them producing them. But later in the season that could be a benefit. You might want some extra plants. Here we go, we've got another one here just developing. The runner comes from the crown of the plant, it develops out and produces a little new strawberry plant at the end, which will root, and once that's well established you can snip it off from the parent. But I'm going to remove this completely, just follow it back, trace it back to the base and just pinch it away completely. Keep the crops watered, particularly if the weather's dry and the fruits are starting to swell, to make sure you get the best and the biggest crops. And although the soil has been enriched, I probably do also give an occasional liquid feed with a high potash fertiliser. Potash is the nutrient you need to encourage fruits and crops to produce the flowers and the fruits. At the end of the summer, when fruiting's finished, I just remove the netted cage and I trim off all the leaves from the strawberries. Just use some shears or secateurs, cut off all of the foliage completely, clear the bed, get rid of the debris, get rid of any unwanted runners, and you can leave the bed like that for the winter. And new growth will start again the following spring, and hopefully the bed will keep cropping for 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. There you have it, a nice simple strawberry bed. I hope it's given you a few ideas to use in your own garden. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel at Adam's Gardening Guides, and I'll be bringing some more gardening guides to you very soon. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about planting up my strawberry bed, and if you did, you might want to have a look at my YouTube channel, Adam's Gardening Guides on YouTube, where I've got another video which tells you all about growing strawberries in pots. So if you haven't got room outside for a strawberry bed, but you might have room for a few pots of strawberries on your patio or in your greenhouse or conservatory, then check out my video on how to grow strawberries in pots. Great to see you, and happy gardening.